years ago, in the early 90s, I was out running through the neighborhood, running and walking, and I came across this young man with a Bible in his hand, and he was a young minister. He started to talk to me about the devil. He started to preach about the devil as this, force that's trying to occupy and take over and is a challenge to God and so on. And I then told him, after listening to what he had to say, told him I was a Unity minister. And what I thought about the devil, which I told him I thought it was a metaphor. It wasn't a real actual force. Just like a lot of things in the Bible, Jesus spoke in parables. And so, that's what it was about. Well, at one point, he looked like he started to grow real tense, and he started to back away from me. And at one point he said, "You are possessed by the devil." And, it was like, oh, well, nice to meet you too. God bless you. Some people can get carried away with this idea about the devil. I mean, with the past year, you might have heard preachers talking about this whole thing as a concoction of the devil, COVID-19 concoction of the devil, and just using all kinds of stuff. And getting vaccinated is not necessary because, it's all the devil's work, and the Holy Spirit will take care of you, and all kinds of things of this nature. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I think it's not where I'm coming from. It's not what that young preacher was. The young preacher and I had different views about this whole thing. I mean, with the conspiracy theories, people think that the devil's behind it, and it's helped create the divisiveness in the country. This whole idea of the devil comes from primitive times, when people in primitive times had their gods, they had their devils, and it was people's way of trying to make sense of life. They're trying to explain, why is it that I try to be good or to make changes in my life, and then I do the very opposite of what I want to do? It's like what St. Paul said so beautifully. The thing that I would not do, that I do. And the thing that I want to do, I don't do. That's part of the human condition. Well, people trying to understand what that was about in ancient times came up with this idea that, the devil made me do it, like Flip Wilson. Flip Wilson and the woman who found herself the wife of the preacher, and he asked her, "You bought a new outfit again. How come you bought this new outfit? Didn't you just buy an outfit the other day?" "Well, I was walking down the street and it wasn't my fault. The devil made me do it. The devil made me try on that dress. The devil told me to give him your credit card." So yes, excuses, trying to understand why we do the things that we do. And that's what people came up with. But they will refer to the Bible as proof that there is an evil force lurking about. They will do that. And it's easy to get spooked by it. When I was a student in college, I was freshman or sophomore, something like that. I was studying yoga, philosophy. I was studying metaphysics and unity and different ideas. And I would also go to Christian groups because I was searching for truth. I wanted to know, what did traditional Christians believe? I wanted to also be around other people who believed in God. I didn't care whether they didn't believe exactly the way I did. And I heard them talking about one day the devil was going to unite all the churches together, and there would just be one kind of church, and worshiping one God, but the devil would be in charge. Now, all that sounded pretty good to me. Didn't it sound good to you up until that point? Well, that summer of my freshman year, I applied to go live and work at an ashram in Virginia, the Satchidananda Ashram, to help work on their lotus. It's a beautiful temple they have out there. It's stands for truth is one, paths are many. There's all these temples from all the different artifacts from all the different religions, and a light that goes right up the middle and branches off to the different altars, saying truth is one, paths are many. Well, I wanted to learn more about yoga and the philosophy and to be around those people, so I went there to live right after my freshman year in college. While I was there was still that thought from my friends that the devil would be building this one church thing. And when I met Satchidananda, I said, "Hey, Swami," or something like that. And his response to me, probably he was giving me a message. That's not how you talk to a Swami, or I don't know. It could have just been me. But at that point, my fear that I had picked up from these people started to work in my mind. I thought, maybe I am here helping the devil build his one church. And so that was just one of the ways that we can freak ourselves out, even with an idea that isn't real, you know? I went back and studied yoga again later on, once I understood things better. So we may wonder, why do people get so upset and worried about the devil, and they start seeing it in places? Because that's what the human mind can do. In fact, Eric Butterworth told a story about a priest in Paris. He was a French priest who was the head of exorcisms in the Catholic Church. And he had been doing this for 50 years. And he describes something called mythomania. He says that people tend to see what they're looking for. And that really, in all his 50 years, he had never seen a genuine possession. He had never seen a genuine experience where someone was actually possessed by the devil or a demon. He believed it was from the confused mind. In fact, he says, if you call the devil, you will see him, or you will see your confused mind's idea of him. Interesting, right? Get you thinking. So we tend to see what we're looking for. And in that case, a confused mind can come up with stuff. William James, who's considered the father of modern psychology, he went through a challenge about this as well at one point in his life, about whether there was a devil and so on. And he discovered in his studies that a healthy mind does not believe in an evil force that's at work. That's what he felt and came to the conclusion of. But people still point to the Bible. They say, yes, but in the Bible it talks a lot about Jesus exorcising demons and this kind of stuff. They talk about Jesus going to the wilderness and being tempted by the devil. And that's all in the scripture, for sure. But again, remember, a lot of the Bible is metaphors. And how would the disciples who wrote this down know that this happened? They weren't in the desert or wilderness with Jesus. They weren't there. He had to tell them. And Jesus, when he taught, frequently spoke in parables. So in this case, the wilderness represents going apart. It represents a time of prayer, a time of self-reflection, a time of being present with yourself. It doesn't mean he actually went out into the wilderness. And even if he did, it was still symbolic, metaphor. This was stuff that was happening inside of Jesus. He was struggling with his ego. That's one way of looking at what the devil is. It's the ego. It's a metaphor for our identification with the personality, our identification with the body, and how we can get all caught up in our emotions and almost be self-possessed. Okay, if you want to use that term, we can bedevil ourselves. So we might say something like, yeah, he was possessed by anger. He was possessed by anger. And when someone loses themselves in emotion and thoughts and gets carried away, we can do some crazy stuff. And it's not because of the devil. It's because we got caught up in our ego and our emotional drama, you see. And people look for an explanation. How could that be? Well, it's our humanness. This whole experience in the wilderness is something that happened inside of Jesus. He was going through that process of spiritual awakening. He was a human being waking up to his divinity. Of course, I love to say he's a spiritual being having a human experience. He was discovering that he was a spiritual being. So there was a lot going on. And the devil took him up on a high mountain and said, look, I'll give you everything. You can have everything that you want. You can be famous. You can be rich. You can have as many followers on Twitter as Kim Kardashian. I mean, you can have whatever you want, whatever you want, Jesus. Fame, power. And Jesus said, that was himself talking. That was his humanness, saying, wow, I could use this spiritual power and ability to get whatever I want in life. And then he says, no, that's not what I'm about. I'm not here to do that. I'm not looking for fulfillment from outside. I don't need these things. Sure, they come into your life. There's nothing wrong with them. But that's not what my life is about. He was saying to himself, he was having that struggle that, like the butterfly in the cocoon goes through to become the butterfly. Like the chicken breaking out of the egg. It struggles. He was having a struggle with himself. And that's good. That was part of his evolution. It says the devil, which is symbolic, again, for the ego, took him up on the temple and said, hey, throw yourself down and let your angels lift you up. Again, that was the ego saying, wow, with my spiritual powers, I can do a lot of stuff. I could become a leader of nations. I can do all kinds of number of things. But that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to be famous. I'm here to use my talents and skills and to make the difference that God is calling me to make. That's what I'm here. I'm not here to become a powerful politician or a ruler. I'm here to do what God is calling me to do, and that's not it. See, he was saying no to that. And then the other temptation, by the way, temptation is a metaphor for the inertia that's in our human inertia. When you ever notice you try to change something in your life and it's difficult, you try to, I know a lady, she wanted to give up sweets and sugar, and next thing you know, she found herself at the freezer. Haagen-Dazs was calling her, come hither, come hither. I have another friend who was reading the Daily Word and had just read, I will treat my husband with love and respect. And later on that day, she got in a fight. Not my husband. I will treat people with love and respect. Later that day, she got in a fight with the husband. The thing that I would do, I don't do. The thing that I don't want to do, that I do. That's the challenge, see? And he was facing some of that. That's what the temptations are, the inertial response. he saw a rock and he heard, why don't you turn that rock into bread, Jesus? Now keep in mind, the man, if he was in the wilderness, if he was fasting, he was hungry. Temptation, gee, he had the habit of eating. He liked to eat. And in that case, he was fasting, and he'd like to turn that thing into bread. Or also, he said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that flows out of the mouth of God. In other words, if he were fasting, he was saying, look, I am a spiritual being. I don't need to eat right now. I'm fasting. I'm the one in charge. My body's not in charge. I'm in charge. I'm the master. And so I won't do that. I will not turn it into bread. I mean, what's wrong with turning it into bread? Everybody could eat if he did that. No, it was a metaphor. It was a metaphor for his spiritual growth that was happening inside of himself. You see? And we all are going through that process of growth. We all have those opportunities to grow. And so the devil is not a force that's lurking around in a red suit with a pitchfork trying to tempt everybody. You might say, well, what about possessions, Justin? What is that? People being possessed. Well, I mean, again, in those days, they didn't know what certain disorders were. They didn't know about all mental diseases and things that went on. You know, it could be an explanation like that. So it's not a force. In Unity and in New Thought, we see there's one presence and one power in the universe, God the good omnipotent. One presence. That means that the ultimate reality of everything is spirit. It's God. It's consciousness. And where there's one presence and power, there can't be another power trying to take over God. There can't be another power that's trying to battle it out, this cosmic battle. In this corner is God weighing 9 million pounds, and in this corner, the devil weighing, what, a couple ounces. No, it's not a battle. It's one presence and one power, you see. But there is something in human consciousness that struggles. And it's that inertial pull in human consciousness that we deal with. It's our old habit patterns. It's negative habit patterns that we get caught in. And there's a way out. But the good news is we're in control. As long as you are the master of your mind, and we all can be the master of our minds. You that are living in there, you that has a mind, you that has emotions, you that has a body, you are consciousness. And you are the master of your mind, or can be. By being able to remain in that awareness of who you are, and the observer state, the witness state, what the Buddhists call the seat of consciousness, where you're able to observe your thoughts and the emotions that come up within you so that they can pass through you like clouds in a sky, so that you don't get bedeviled. You don't get sucked in to the drama of the mind and the emotions. Isn't that what happens? People get, have you ever, I know you have, I have you ever gotten really angry and it was almost like that anger was taken over? You were like, I remember one time, the scientists tell us that as the day goes on, you use up energy that you would normally use for your willpower. I don't know if that's true or not, but I certainly have had times where at the end of the day, where a lot has gone on during the day, and my energy was low. And I remember one time, this girl I was dating, she drove her car and I drove my car. And it was a long day on a Sunday. Lots of stuff went on. There were meetings and stuff. And I was just really, it was like 3 o'clock or so, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I just wanted to rest. I was like, well, let's go to a movie. And so I followed her in her car, and she drove like a bat out of hell, speaking of the devil. She just flew down, and I just couldn't keep up with her, and I wasn't going to speed to keep up with her. And then she pulled out in front of traffic into the movie parking lot. So I don't know what I did, but all I could tell you is I didn't have the willpower to control my annoyance. And I remember sitting in the car, I remember her pulling up into the parking lot, and I pulled up next to her, and I was just anxious and frustrated from the day. It was there was a lot of stuff that occurred during that day. And then trying to follow her, and I remember sitting in the driver's seat going, don't get out of the car. Do not get out. Do not get out of the, I could not control myself. I got out of the car and I expressed my annoyance. And I'm not saying there's not a time to do that, but that was not the time to do that. But, sometimes it feels like you've been taken over. You're possessed, you're bedeviled. But it's not a force. It's in our humanness. Sometimes we have questions about how can people do the stuff they do, right? Like mass genocide. I've seen documentaries on it and read about it where these are calculating people. They know what they're doing. It's not like they're under some big emotional thing, but maybe there's driving hatred inside of them. I don't know. But, those questions do come up. Well, how does people do that? How do they kill women and children? And why is it so challenging sometimes to keep a positive attitude? How come I have to work so hard? Well, I don't know if hard's the right word, but continually make the effort to stay on the spiritual path, to stay in this seat of awareness, the seat of consciousness. Why is it so tough? Well, it's not because there's an evil force at work. It's just because it's part of the creative energies of the universe. It's part of being a human. And the spiritual path is learning to live in this world, but not lose your seat of consciousness, not get lost in the drama of our own stuff, but to be able to observe it, watch it, look at it, and let it flow through us and make choices from our inner self. We could read the paper, we could read history books and go, why? There's just so much negative stuff about people and human beings. How do we know there's no devil causing all this? Well, there's also a lot of positive stuff. There's a lot of great stuff going on. It's just that people are so often driven by fear. They don't want to see that. They want to watch the news and see what's out there? What's going on now? Caught up in all the drama. But when you're on the spiritual path for a while, as probably you are, I don't need that drama. I don't want that drama. I know what joy feels like. I know what peace feels like. I know what it feels like to be centered. And I don't want all the drama. So Jesus Christ was an example of someone who expressed the highest potential that's inside of us. I love the thought of Emerson that we are gods in disguise. We're God in disguise. That's our true nature. And we can either focus on all that's wrong about people and ourselves, or we can focus on that our potential is good. Let's focus on the people who express that great potential. Focus on the people who are expressing that goodness. Catch yourself doing something good. Catch yourself doing something wonderful and acknowledge that's my true nature. Because all of it's in there. There aren't evil people. They're not. Gavin Becker, who wrote the book, The Gift of Fear, he said that people we call monsters, he said there are no monsters. They're not evil people. They're human beings exactly like you and me. They're exactly, only the difference is we made other choices. And he knows that from personal experience, because he grew up in a life very similar to another person, very similar background of abuse and so on, only Gavin made a different choice. So there aren't monsters, there aren't evil people, they're just people. And we're all part of the one mind and the one presence, the one consciousness. And if we think there are evil people, then we are not going to be tuned into our own humanness enough to detect someone who is not coming from the right place. See, when you're spiritually centered and you're listening to your intuition, when there is somebody to be concerned about, your intuition will let you know. The word intuition comes from the word tuere, which means to protect. To protect. That's our greatest protection, Gavin told us. So, in other words, there's no force lurking around out there. I don't believe so. I just can't buy that. It's a metaphor for the ego. And the key is to remain rooted in consciousness, to not let yourself get sucked into the drama of thoughts and emotions or race consciousness that also influences us, and to just stay as much as possible. And when we get off track, get back in there of being seated in the seat of self, in that seat of consciousness, and living from that place. That's the place of peace. That's the place of joy. That's the place we want to live in. Not focusing all the stuff that's wrong about people. You may have heard the story of the chief talking to his son and telling the son, "Son, there's two wolves fighting inside of you, inside of all of us." And the son said, "Really, Dad? Well, who's going to win?" And the chief says, "The one you feed the most." So let's feed the good stuff. Let's feed the possibility, the potential that abides within every one of us. Let's get still for a moment. And today we just take a nice sigh, a deep breath of relief, knowing we don't have to worry about some evil force trying to get us. That we're the masters of our mind, or we can be. As long as we are in charge, nothing can get into our mind unless we let it. We're the ones in charge of our life. We have the choice and we have the responsibility. Sure, we don't always do the things that we want to do. We're not always successful at first. But we have the power within us to keep on trying, to learn, to grow, keep on going and trying until we are successful. It takes power, it takes willpower, it takes attention, it takes effort, and it takes never giving up. There's nothing worse than giving up. That's the only failure there is. We don't have to give up. We can keep on keeping on. But we accept that the devil didn't make me do it. I did it. I might have been influenced by things. I might have been influenced by people. I might have been influenced, might have been under the influence, whatever it might be, but it's because I'm the one in here. I'm the one in charge, or I can be. So I'm responsible for myself and for my life. And we're grateful, Father, Mother God, for your guidance and your direction in teaching us and guiding us and showing us the way. We shall know the truth, and the truth shall make us free. Amen.